I think it's happened enough that we need to be concerned about it, and that is the religious persecution of Christians in Georgia colleges and universities. Now, I need to be clear and upfront with you here. There are a lot of people who, particularly progressive evangelicals, there are progressive evangelicals who, in the United States, they hear the word persecution and they decide that if you are not dying, if you're not at risk of being murdered, then you're not actually being persecuted. I mean, this is a growing thing with the political left when you point out that Christians in this country are being targeted, their businesses are being targeted. Well, it's not really persecution. I know people who've died. I know people who are living in fear that they're going to be beheaded for being. That's not really persecution. No, it is persecution. It's just not as bad. It's amazing how, listen, on the day before the day of judgment, you're going to find that the chief allies of the secular wokes who hate Jesus Christ are the progressive Christians. Because the progressive Christians hate him just as much as the secular wokes. They just don't want to admit it. They're the useful idiots right now, willful useful idiots of the progressives. Got some supposedly evangelical church in Nashville saying, oh, well, the Bible's not really the word of God. What is it then? Oh, it's a collection of humanity. It's poetry and prose connecting us to God, but it's us. Really? Well, then why? Why do you need it? Why bother going to your church if it's not the word of God? Well, we stand in the tradition of earlier times. Oh, bull. It's persecution. It may not be like in other places, but it's still persecution. A friend of mine had a seminary professor who said, if you've never been persecuted, you may not really be a Christian. In fact, Jesus himself says to take up your cross is to be persecuted. Your persecution may be, well, turns out you're a Christian. We don't want to hire you. We don't like your kind. Or you're chased out of a job because you support traditional marriage, or you don't get an advancement. Or the company aligns, the managers of the company align against you to block your advance because they don't want a Jesus freak. This has happened to me. This happens to a lot of people I know. If you've never been persecuted in some capacity, you've probably not a Christian. Now, the goal here as well is to not have a persecution complex. Oh, well, they're all out to get me because I love Jesus. No, sometimes it's you're a jerk. But for those of you here in Georgia, follow along with me. I wrote a book years ago called You Will Be Made to Care with my buddy Bill Blankshade. Let me read you some of this. This is at Augusta State University. This is a number of years ago. The early 2000s, Augusta State University, hardly a liberal bastion, or so she thought. Halfway through her second year there, Jennifer received an unexpected phone call from a professor saying that she would be required to meet with a panel of professors to discuss her participation in the program. Now, what was the program? Jennifer Keaton had a passion for counseling, and she was pursuing a master's in education at Augusta State University. And the professors were questioning her competency as a counselor because of her religious beliefs. They basically wanted to talk to me about information that I'd written about in my papers or statements I'd made in class or even private conversations that I had with students outside of class, Jennifer recalls. She was understandably taken aback at this intrusion into her personal life. From her early days in the program, Jennifer had heard the faculty tell students that the classes and the counseling community were a safe place for students to express their beliefs. The whole idea of counseling is going a little bit deeper and exploring what you believe and why you believe it and discovering your identity in life, your purpose in life, Jennifer said. We interviewed her. We were told at the very beginning to come in with our set of values and beliefs, and it's okay. We're a melting pot of these things. Well, apparently, they weren't welcoming her Christian beliefs that engaging in homosexual behavior is a sin. Jennifer was never unwilling to counsel people who were homosexual or transgender or had questions about their gender. She was prepared to do that, but the school told her they feared her views wouldn't permit her to counsel people in the way they deemed appropriate. To fix what they perceived to be a problem, they presented Jennifer with a remediation plan that would determine whether she could continue studying at Augusta State University. The remediation plan stated a couple of different things she needed to do, or events she needed to attend. The fine print was that she needed to write papers that stated that she had changed her views. She refused to complete the remediation plan and was booted from the program. She filed a lawsuit and she lost. This was Augusta State University in Georgia. Then there's Georgia Tech. In 2006, again, this is from my book. In 2006, two students at the Georgia Institute of Technology, Georgia Tech, filed a pivotal lawsuit against the school in a case that brought national attention to the administration's thuggish tactics. Ruth Malhotra, a conservative Christian and president of the College Republicans, and Orit Sklar, the president of the Jewish Student Union, had endured violation after violation of their First Amendment rights to their free speech and freedom of religion. They were being told not what they could and could not say, but how they should think. Ruth's parents were immigrants from India. Her father was a marketing research professor in Georgia Tech's business program. Ruth grew up admiring the school's traditions and reputation. I was really excited about going to a school that I was respected and loved, and I knew it would be a very diverse environment with many different backgrounds and worldviews. Ruth declared international affairs and public policy as her majors and quickly became involved in student organizations. She never called herself an activist. She joined organizations that reflected her convictions: sanctity of life, traditional marriage, Christianity. She tried to live a life consistent with what she believed. Ruth saw professors protesting the ROTC on Veterans Day, priests teaching that Jesus and his disciples were gay, and numerous sexually graphic promotions for one thing or another. She didn't take any of it as a personal offense because she didn't have a victim mentality. People at Georgia Tech could disagree. But then she experienced the double standard at Georgia Tech. In her sophomore year, she was called into the office of the dean of the College of Liberal Arts. According to Ruth, the dean said, "Ruth, you're asking too many questions and you're here to listen and learn." When Ruth said she felt that some of the professors were practicing indoctrination rather than education, the dean responded, "Ruth, students have been indoctrinated for the first 18 years of their lives by their parents and by their churches, and we only have 4 years to undo the damage." The censorship spread beyond the classroom to the campus organizations and activities of which Ruth was a part. Students of those organizations were increasingly accused of violating the university's tolerance policy, a speech code that prohibited any speech considered intolerant or offensive. The only judges of what was intolerant were the school's administrators themselves. In one instance, one of Ruth's student organizations planned to do outreach to promote and explain their views on traditional marriage. They purchased a wedding cake, they handed out cake and pamphlets to students, and Georgia Tech shut it down and said it was offensive. The thing we're trying to do were very, I thought, basic in terms of just saying, here's what we believe, Ruth recalls. We knew that people out there agreed with us. We wanted the right to speak. In her senior year, the dean of student involvement called Ruth into his office and said the college Republicans, of which Ruth was the president, were in trouble for marketing themselves too well. They had a display that compared conservative women to feminist women and what liberals offered in feminism. Because it made the Republican and conservative side look better, they had to be punished. During coming out week, an LGBT, now isn't this cute? We wrote this back several years ago, 2010, I guess, and we just said LGBT. Now you got to do LGBTQIA plus or whatever. The Alphabet Gang initiative sponsored by Georgia Tech. The college Republicans simply declined to participate in coming out week. We weren't trying to shut down anyone. We never said we wanted canceled out week or coming out week canceled. We just wanted to not participate. In fact, we treated everyone with dignity and respect, but we weren't going to endorse it. The dean of students charged Ruth with being intolerant, telling her the high rates of suicide among gay students was because of people like Ruth. That's right. The dean of students told Ruth that gay suicide was because of people like Ruth. The college Republicans were restricted to a tiny, obscure area of campus called a free speech zone, where they were permitted to hold their events and speak without fear. But even these restrictions weren't enough for Georgia Tech. The president of Georgia Tech called Ruth Malhotra in and told her that she either needed to change her views or leave Georgia Tech. and she was only months away from graduating with the highest honors at Georgia Tech. So she filed a lawsuit with the Alliance Defending Freedom. And it went from bad to worse. The Los Angeles Times said that Christian students were being sued for the right to be intolerant. That was their headline. She began receiving hate mail, rape threats, death threats. An organization was formed, CLAM, Conservatives and Liberals Against Malhotra. It was formed to oppose her. The organization used racial slurs, handed out Twinkies while saying Ruth was yellow on the outside and white on the inside. She's from India. The school administration never shut down CLAM or accused them of being intolerant. Law enforcement had to escort her around college campus, even accompanied her to graduation. She won her lawsuit. She and Orit Slur, they won their lawsuit. Georgia Tech had to repeal their speech code. They were subject to judicial oversight to make sure they left it behind for good. A policy called Safe Space was also challenged. It was an LGBT initiative that was run through the Office of the Dean of Students. The Dean of Diversity employed a scale of tolerance, which rated how tolerant different religions were. The Buddhists were deemed most accepting, the Southern Baptists the least tolerant. It was taxpayer-funded administrators doing this. The judge ripped the policy to shreds. Georgia Tech had a policy on campus rating the tolerance of various religions to the gay community. Now, those happened a few years ago. Yesterday, in the United States Supreme Court, Georgia Gwinnett College had to go to the Supreme Court for remarkably doing exactly what Georgia Tech had done to Ruth Malhotra. Georgia Gwinnett College had 2 Christian students on campus and denied them the ability to share their faith on campus. When they complained, they were restricted to a free speech zone. While in the free speech zone, they were harassed by campus security and told to shut up. The students sued. Now, remarkably, surprise, surprise, Georgia Gwinnett College shut down all of their policies related to religious discrimination once the students sued. When the students sued, they said, oh, well, we're done. You sued us. Well, the students continued to advance their case because they had nominal damages they wanted, and they went to the Supreme Court on the issue of nominal damages. Lower courts have said, well, if it's just nominal, like they want $1, it's not really a justiciable matter anymore. The Supreme Court said, no, it is. You should still hear the case. I actually, on principle, agree with John Roberts. He filed the lone dissent, his very first lone dissent ever, where he said, if it's just nominal issues, this gives courts too much power. Remarkably, it was John Roberts saying this gives courts too much power. And he's actually right. I can see this being abused over time. But the bottom line is that we have yet another college, Augusta State, Georgia Tech, and now Georgia Gwinnett, all persecuting Christian students. And it's not from a decade ago. It's from the last couple of years that this is happening. What is going on with Georgia's public institutions, our public colleges and universities, that they feel so emboldened to persecute Christians on campus? In this state, where our Republican legislators refuse to actually stand up on cultural concerns for conservatives. They go through dog and pony shows about voting, but they don't actually want to pass substantive protections. We need bold conservative leaders in the state. But also, I think it's not just the Board of Pardon and Paroles that the state legislature needs to look into. They need to start looking into the Board of Regents. Why is the Board of Regents allowing the routine persecution of Christians on college campuses in Georgia? This has become a pattern. You got 3 different public universities all employing the same practices that are continually decided to be unconstitutional by federal courts, and yet they keep doing them. What is going on with our Board of Regents that allows this to keep happening on our public campuses? This was in 2016 at Georgia Gwinnett, and they only abandoned the policy after the suit was filed, but the policy they had was the policy that Georgia Tech had that was ruled unconstitutional in 2010. What the heck is going on here?